Obviously, they're looking at that $75 million figure and saying, that's money that could go to schools, healthcare, helping workers impacted by tariffs. So there are a lot of questions being asked about whether this is the right way to spend $75 million.
Welcome back to Closer Look across the Village Media Network and available wherever you get your favorite podcasts. I'm Scott Sexsmith with Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief. Okay, yesterday on the program, we talked about Doug Ford. We're going to kind of keep that going tonight because yesterday, at an appearance at the Empire Club of Toronto, with Ben Mulrooney as host, a little fireside chat.
Yes.
The premier drops a bomb, so to speak, and announces he's going to spend $75 million on a U.S. ad campaign.
Yeah, right at the same time he said he almost beat up a Home Depot thief, right? So it's like, which headline do we go with? So that one got a lot of attention.
Speaking of which, did you see Kathleen Wynne's tweet today?
No.
It was, I'm paraphrasing, but something to the effect of, really? This is where we're at now, being a vigilante in a parking lot of a big box store?
I still love the part where he says, I ditched my security team. I just would love to know how he ditched his security team.
Ditched a security team to do a Home Depot run.
Yeah, do a Home Depot run.
Love that. Anyway, $75 million.
So two P's. You got the him beating up the thief and then $75 million for commercials south of the border. This is a big deal. I mean, we've seen it in the past where the Ford government has put together commercials to try to convince Americans that Ontario is Canada's your greatest trading partner. Ontario brings so much positivity to the American economy.
Yeah.
We saw right after Trump was elected, we saw during the Super Bowl, there was a commercial.
Right, yeah.
And the cost of those commercials kind of came out months later through FOIs and public accounts reports in the tens of millions of dollars, right?
Yeah,
and a lot of questions surrounding whether we should have spent that much money on ads that maybe didn't really make any difference. This time around, Premier Ford has come straight out and said we're spending $75 million on a multi-week, multi-month ad campaign south of the border featuring Ronald Reagan. So it's going to be old clips of Ronald Reagan addresses. He, of course, was a huge proponent of free trade, very much against tariffs.
Very much, yeah.
And we talked about this. We were almost going to play. We had Pete Hoekstra on, the U.S. Ambassador to Canada. If we had some more time, we were going to play some of those clips.
Derek had it queued up.
I feel like somebody stole our idea, but the first one is out and features Reagan talking about the dangers of protectionism. What happens when you hug protectionism, when you become too dependent on, when tariffs become your policy, and what the negative ramifications that can have on the American economy. And it's a pretty powerful commercial. It's pretty well done. But like I said, the fact that he said that Ford is saying he's spending $75 million on it is kind of, I think, a message just as much to Ontarians to show that we're on this, as opposed, and then not just toward Americans and trying to get that message across. So we're going to talk to Catherine DeClercq. She's one of our great journalists at the Trillium. She wrote about it yesterday. She covered the event, and we're going to kind of dig into how this is all going to work with her.
Premier Doug Ford is spending big bucks to try to convince Americans that tariffs are not the best way forward. His government, in fact, is about to launch a $75 million ad campaign south of the border, featuring the words of a former Republican president. Joining us tonight to talk about the plan is Catherine DeClercq, our newsletter editor at the Trillium. Catherine, always good to see you. Thanks for taking the time.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, Catherine, Premier Ford announcing the campaign just yesterday at an Empire Club of Canada event in Toronto. What did he tell the audience, and what was his pitch?
Yeah, so he started his speech with this ad. Actually, it played before he even got up on stage, which gave us a little bit of insight into what was coming. And he got up and he said, we're going to do this amazing thing. We're going to spend $75 million on this ad campaign targeting Republican districts. And the premier loves Ronald Reagan. He's used quotes of his in various speeches over the years, especially when it comes to tariffs. He was very excited to say that, it was his idea. We should take these words from this 1987 radio tariffs where this president, Ronald Reagan, talks about the tariffs of this negative consequence on businesses, on foreign relations, and blast it out to the United States. And that's what they are doing.
So, Catherine, do we know exactly what the rollout plan is? How do you understand that to be? And will these appear over the next few months? Do we know what networks we're talking in the States?
It'll be on most major networks, I believe, with the exception of CNN, although negotiations are still in the works. And they're expected to roll out in the next couple of weeks, and they will run until end of January 2026.
Okay, as you mentioned, Ronald Reagan is the narrator of these commercials. The first one played at the Empire Club event. Why don't we have a listen to that one, in case some of our listeners haven't heard it?
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. But over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. Throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. America's jobs and growth are at stake.
Wow, nothing like the dulcet tones of the Gipper from years gone by. Catherine, your thoughts on the spot?
Yeah, I mean, it's, as we were saying, a slick ad, but it's Ronald Reagan's address with all these short video clips, right down to the dinner table, workers, manufacturing facilities, farmers out in the field, American flags. You don't really know that it's coming from Ontario until the very end.
Yeah, I'm just curious about this, Catherine, and I don't want to put you on the spot and you may not know the answer, but because it was from an old Ronald Reagan radio address that is, I guess, essentially public domain, is that how you would get the rights that anybody could use this, or is there an approval process to actually use his likeness?
I actually don't know. At the end, there is like a disclaimer that says courtesy of the Ronald Reagan Library. Or Congressional Library. I'm not sure what the official title is. Yeah. So I imagine they got some kind of permission to use the full video and audio, but I really don't know what the privacy copyright rules are.
We should have prepped you. I'm just kidding. No, that'd be a great FOI request to find out how much of that $75 million if they actually had to pay the Ronald Reagan Archives or Library. But yeah, the $75 million mark, $75 million figure really sticks out. Because as far as I can tell, when they've done this in the past and put these ad blitzes in south of the border, they didn't tell the public how much they were going to cost. This time they came out and said, we're going to spend $75 million. Is that a change of course for them?
It is unusual. Usually we find out much later, months, sometimes even up to a year, how much an advertisement campaign costs through public accounts or the Auditor General reports on government advertising. So to come out and directly say this is how much this ad campaign is going to cost is odd. And I think it was said very much like as a point of pride, like we're spending, we're spending all this money. We're going to put forward this ad and it's going to be effective. And I'm not sure if it was the plan to announce the exact figure or not. But it's definitely not something that happens on a regular basis.
And we know, Catherine, this isn't the first time that the Ford government has done this, thinking back to Super Bowl last year. But how do they measure success? How do they know if it's working?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And we asked the finance minister who was at the Empire Club event on Tuesday that exact question. And he said, we'll know if it's effective if we have a trade deal with the United States. I'm not exactly sure how you can measure the impact of an advertising campaign compared to, months of negotiations between federal officials and the White House. And if we're using that measurement, you have to wonder how effective our past ad campaigns have been, because we don't have a trade deal with the United States. And we have done a few campaigns south of the border last year. So it's really up in the air, and it's something that the opposition is also asking.
Mm-hmm. If I recall right, you've been on some of these trips that Doug Ford has taken to Washington, covering them for us. What has been the reaction among lawmakers there when you talk to them? Does this resonate with them? I mean, it's one thing to have commercials going to viewers all over the country or all over certain areas, but how does it resonate with the people who actually make decisions?
I mean, I haven't heard them talk about the advertising campaigns. And this campaign is a little different. You know, our past ads have been all about how we can strengthen our relationship with the United States. It was still at a time when Doug Ford was proposing Fortress AmCam, you know, let's have more economic business with the United States, with governments. And so now this is a little different. Now we're attacking tariffs. We're being very clear that tariffs are bad. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that will make a difference, but I do know that they're targeting Republican states and districts in order to hopefully have that message trickle upwards.
Mm-hmm. Catherine, you briefly mentioned the opposition parties. What are they saying? What's their reaction to this spend?
Obviously, they're looking at that $75 million figure and saying, you know, that's money that could go to schools, healthcare, helping workers impacted by tariffs. So there are a lot of questions being asked about whether this is the right way to spend $75 million. And like I mentioned before, they're also saying, how do we know this is going to be efficient? How do we know that, you know, this is actually making a difference and saving jobs and helping break through trade negotiations and end up with a new deal for Canada?
Mm-hmm. Maybe this isn't a fair question, but as I see this, I wonder how much of this is actually geared toward us as Ontarians to make it seem like the Ford government is doing something important to try to hammer this message home south of the border, as it is to actually convincing Americans.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I mean, the Premier Doug Ford has been very vocal throughout this trade war. You know, he's doing news conferences and interviews with U.S. networks. It's unclear if this is just part of that process, if this is something different. But it's definitely on par with what I think the Ontario government is doing, which is trying to hammer out a message. Maybe that it thinks the federal government isn't doing publicly, because a lot of those negotiations are behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. The prime minister is not talking about it publicly. They're keeping things very close to the chest. Whereas Premier Doug Ford has been a lot more vocal. And I think you can just look at our website to see how vocal he has been on a daily basis. Even today, he spoke about it again, about Donald Trump and how we need to come to a deal for workers. So I think it's just on par with the government's messaging.
That's right. Just to remind everyone, that's the trillium.ca is the website.
Exactly.
Yes.
Go ahead, Scott.
Catherine, you'll recall we had U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, on the program several weeks back. And he was quick to tell Frisco and I that he's always keeping an eye and an ear out for what Doug Ford is saying. But at the end of the day, it's not resonating and not doing a thing, which begs the question, is throwing, another $75 million at this really going to be effective?
Yeah, and it's a message that we've seen since really the beginning of the trade war and the beginning of when Doug Ford went down to Washington. During the election campaign, he held this event with was supposed to be American business leaders and Canadian business leaders all in Washington, D.C. And a lot of them were saying like, yeah, this is nice, but, all of these, brochures about Fortress AmCam, these meetings, they're not going to make a difference. The president is going to do what the president wants to do. And that's it. I don't know how much that message that has changed throughout all of this. So I guess it's just a waiting game to see what happens next.
All right, Catherine, before we let you go, anything you want to add to the conversation? I
mean, I'm very interested to see what the Auditor General says next on advertising spending, because I believe it was about $103 million was what the Ontario government spent on advertising for the last fiscal year. That was a full year. And we're already seeing $75 million on this campaign alone.
Yes.
So it'll be interesting when we get the fuller numbers. I don't know. Maybe he'll announce it at the next news conference. Who knows?
Maybe.
All right. There's Catherine de Klerk, our newsletter editor at the Trillium. Thanks, Catherine. Great to see you as always.
Thanks.
Okay, we briefly mentioned U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra. I think we should rewind a little bit for the benefit of the audience so that they can hear again exactly what Hoekstra had to say about Doug Ford.
I've had the opportunity to talk with Doug, and of course, I mean, it being part of the Trump administration, it's kind of like, I watch what happens in the media. I watch what Doug says, as does the Trump administration, and they're a very media savvy bunch.
Mm-hmm. Everyone's wondering if he brought you a bottle of Crown Royal, but I won't ask you that. Can you tell us any more details about your meeting with Premier Ford? Did anything come out of it? Was anything accomplished from your meetings with him?
Well, it was early in my tenure here, and we've had the opportunity since then to talk about a couple of different issues. And obviously, Doug is on a different page than where the U.S. administration is, and so So no, I haven't moved Doug to a point where I can get him to be a strong advocate for the Canadian-American relationship.
I often look back at our interviews and wish that I had asked a certain follow-up question. And with that one, I wished I'd asked what he meant by Doug Ford doesn't understand the relationship. Because if you ask Doug Ford, he certainly thinks he understands.
He thinks he does.
Yeah, he thinks he understands the relationship and what's wrong with it right now. But
he is Captain Canada.
That's the hindsight 2020, Scott. I could go back at all our interviews and realize that I should have asked 48 different questions that I didn't ask.
Coulda, woulda, shoulda.
We learn. We're trying to get better every day.
Not all heroes wear capes. Right?
That's for sure.
Ask Captain Canada. Okay, that's it for us tonight. Follow us on social media, closerlookpodcast.ca. That's our website. We'd love for you to check it out and sign up, and we'll send you episodes 6 days a week. Closerlookpodcast.ca. And, of course, comments always welcome. Closerlook@villagemedia.ca. For Derek Turner, producer of this evening's show, Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief, I'm Scott Sexsmith. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow night at 7, right here on Closer Look.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.